Well, here we are, thanking God once again. It's Friday afternoon. That means it's the really live Green Rush talk show all about the cannabis business. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And this week, we're going to be joined as a guest host with Rick Thompson. He's our regular Michigan State correspondent for our Weed Talk News show and also the executive director of the Normal Division in Michigan. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Jimmy, I'm always awesome, and it's great to be on Green.
Yeah, and happy to have you on here with us as well. As always, we look forward to your weekly news reports in our We Talk News program. There's a lot of stuff happening as we speak in the cannabis industry as far as news goes, and we're also right in the middle, we're only a few days away from midterm elections, and that is going to be a very interesting result. No matter which way it goes, there's going to be plenty of things to talk about a week from today after the election. But joining us from Washington, D.C. is Michael Correa. He's the Director of Government Relations for the National Cannabis Industry Association. We call him NCIA. Michael, thank you so much for joining us again here on Green Rush Live.
Hey, Jimmy, it's great to be here. Beautiful Friday. I just have to say I love Rick's backdrop, the books. You look all sophisticated and everything. I need to stay like this. I just have this piece of artwork behind me. That's it. I need to class it up.
It's a tapestry. So yeah, for sure. Yep. I got to be honest. I don't collect that many books. No.
It makes him look
like cannabis.
And for the record, I probably have as many books in the other room. I just choose to be surrounded by flora and fauna. Okay, that's just that's my studio. Hey, Michael, there's a lot of things happening as we speak, but I do want to get right into the what was the lead story on our news show that was released about maybe 2-3 hours ago on We Talk News, and it will be following this particular live stream, this live show at 6 o'clock. And that is the fact that there's whispering going on that safe banking plus may be happening in the lame duck Congress. I don't know when, but it's going to be another week, 2-3 weeks, and or some expungement issues with that. And will there be descheduling? Because I continue to say that's the one thing I want to see happen. Michael, where are we right now as far as the scuttlebutt in DC goes, as far as federal cannabis reform?
So, I mean, the one thing you mentioned, safe banking, you mentioned the lame duck. We had our lobby days in September, and Senator Merkley spoke at our press conference, and he said they were talking about this. They had language. They had some ideas of Safe Plus. And, you know, when people talk about Plus, people sort of know the big pictures. It's around expungement. It's around veterans. It's around research, stuff like that. Nothing major, but some ways to get more buy-in from Democratic people like Booker and Schumer, because they want to address all the issues of cannabis, but they're not going to be addressed in SAFE. Can we get a little more to make it more palatable for them? And so that got me excited about a month or so ago, but I have been talking with Senate offices, a lot of Senate leadership offices around SAFE, and I'll be honest with you, all of them are in a wait and see period right now. None of them, there is no language floating around. It's just still that concept. There are really good discussions. We've talked to the Republican side, Democratic side, and everyone's just waiting. And so there's not really serious discussions going on. I hate to say it, it's probably a game of chicken right now just to see what happens with the election and then see who's in a position of authority, where's going to be the leverage from a negotiating standpoint of what they can do or not do with SAFE, and then come back and revisit it. So it's frustrating because I assume they would be doing more discussions now, getting closer to the election. It looks like they're just going to wait till the election and then decide who has the leverage and what can they offer from there. And, you know, we mentioned the election. There's a chance, you know, a close election like Georgia may not, it may go to a runoff. That may be a couple weeks before we figure out. What if it's 49-50 with that election still outgoing? We could be waiting till December before we know. Just like in 2020, we didn't know how it would turn out until January 2021, where it sort of played out. So I think we'll get 90% certainty by next Wednesday where we're at, but we may have a seat or two still open.
Since we have Rick alongside here in Michigan, there's been some changes in that state too, but there are 5 states, I believe, that have ballot questions related to the cannabis space, whether it be adult use or medical. It does look like Maryland is going to pass it. How do you view some of the other states that have adult use or at least a medical program on the ballot question this fall? Oh, Rick, you can answer that too
I'm
if
sorry.
you want.
Well, first of all, I'm excited about it. You know, you have North and South Dakota both going at it. And frankly, the center part of the United States of America has really been a holdover in a lot of ways and a lot of issues. And cannabis has been one of those. So I'm hopeful that it'll pass us through. Now, recognize that not all legalization programs are created equal. If you remember Ohio's history, Responsible Ohio tried to have a statewide legalization program that the voters rejected, largely because cannabis advocates could not buy into that particular program. And the very next time it was offered to voters, they approved it. So it's possible that some of these may be a good first try and then leading off into a second effort. But I think we get 3 of the 5. That's what we've been looking at.
Michael, you concur?
Yeah, and Rick's correct. Every legalization bill is not the exact same. And so, Ohio showed years ago that, hey, why are we going to sit here and let monopolies and monopolist companies get all the money? It has to be sort of open, and so it's not just legalization. The support is there for legalization, but the devil is in the details. And for the most part, for the past few years, it's been blue states have been doing this, and so now you're starting to see the traditional purple states and even red states doing this, which will affect more in DC and Republican members. If this passes in like an Arkansas or other true Republican states. It already passed in South Dakota, and then the courts threw it out. I'm assuming it will pass again. The politicians can listen to their voters and just say, I still hate cannabis, or they want to represent their industries and stand up for their industries, and it could slowly change their perception of what the voters want.
Voters flock to the ballot box whenever cannabis seems to be on in those questions. Is there any idea? And Rick, I want to get your feedback on this too. Does it actually impact the power of Congress because cannabis happens to be on 5 states' ballot questions? I just wonder if that means we'll have more voters come out, and will that tip the power inside the Capitol? I'm fascinated to see what happens. Rick, what do you think?
Well, I think that individual states have their own power dynamics. Here in Michigan, we already had a robust program going on with medical marijuana patients and caregivers prior to the introduction of a medical marijuana business program in 2016. And then, of course, adult use legalization in 2018 too. So we went through a progression that made it easy for the electorate to say yes every time we offered them an opportunity. Some of the states are trying to jump. They're going from absolutely nothing to legalization, or they're advancing themselves in a way that might not necessarily entrance the voters, I think. So again, it comes down to each individual state, but increasing voter turnout, no matter what the issue is a positive. I think that's been one of the real problems in the United States of America, is people choosing to not participate when the government asks them what they care about, and then complaining about it for years after.
And normally, when cannabis is on the ballot, it is usually the highest vote getter of any person running statewide. And you see this over and over again, to where it's just more popular than almost any politician. And you can read in that what you want. What you see, I think, a lot is the cannabis voters, supporters. That could get younger voters out, and that could get more activist voters out that maybe wouldn't have voted regardless. That could help Democrats. I don't think in a state like South Dakota or Arkansas, is that going to make a difference on politics? No. But in a state where it's really close, where it's purple, and you have 2 statewide guys, that could actually bring out some voters and help the Democrats. I doubt it's going to help Republicans, because just, as a whole, Republicans aren't as supportive of this. There's a libertarian wing to this, but I think if it's on a ballot in the state, it's probably going to help Democrats more, but I think it's only going to help Democrats in those really close states, and you could probably just get a handful of those that possibly help.
Yeah, as we look back at the results and analyze them, it's going to be interesting to look at the connections between the ballot questions in the state that perhaps was wavering one way or another. And did the cannabis vote tip the scales or not? And by the way, it's 2022. I cannot believe we're still talking about the fact that how important it is to get cannabis on the ballot question. Okay, we're talking about ballot questions with cannabis involved with it and how it might impact the power of how our parties deal with each other at the federal level. I live to see the day. I still pinch myself when I go to cannabis events and talk to people about this. And I teach at the college level, and I literally had to beg 4 kids who are 18 plus, haven't registered to vote, to please go and vote, and explain to them how important it is. Because a lot of these 18-year-olds, these college kids, they don't recognize that they have power in their brain and in their hand just to make that check, and just have to show a little effort to do that. Again, as we look at all the election results, I'm still fascinated with the fact that we continue to put leaders in place where we don't have half the people in our country who are eligible to vote.
And so I wanted to say one thing. When you look back at cannabis and voters in Colorado, Cory Gardner was the senator, and he was pretty good on cannabis. And they voted him out, and they brought in Hickenlooper, who is a Democrat, is just as good, if not better. You had Dana Rohrabacher, a Republican congressman, the leader of the cannabis for years, got voted out in California. You had Carlos Curbelo, a Republican who was good on cannabis in Florida, got voted out. You had, someone like Susan Collins of Maine, bad on the issue. She retained her election. And so when you look at this, Republicans are going, this is not a winning issue for us. It has not won us seats. It's not carrying voters. And so I think that comes into their calculations on their positions on how open and active and out they're going to be on cannabis. You have Nancy Mace from South Carolina that's sort of been the one salmon fishing or running upstream going against the current, because it's not a popular issue in South Carolina. The Republican Party's not supportive, but her voters are, and you've seen her win. And so we need more Republican winning on this for the Republicans to embrace it. It's just tending to be a more Democratic issue. But I want cannabis reform happening. I get just as frustrated with Dianne Feinstein out there, who has the biggest state in the world, on cannabis, and she's doing nothing on this issue. And we need more people who are supporting this multi-billion-dollar industry and for legalization. We need more supporters up there.
What's her problem, Michael? What's her problem?
She's old. She's 90 years old and should retire, and she's an outdated dinosaur and has old, 60s views on cannabis that are just outdated. The demographics tend to be older people, especially politicians they're not as evolved on this issue, and we just need some new blood in there. She's 90 years old. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Yeah. Hey, you know what?
The war on drugs really did indoctrinate people. It's a brainwashing program, and you really can't fault people who can't shake the programming, because it was put into our lives from a very early age, from elementary school. So someone like Feinstein and those of her ilk, they'd really just sort of have to age out of leadership, right?
Or we bring in term limits, guys. Come on. It's time.
As a political science major, as a person in politics 30 years, I'm not the biggest fan of term limits, but I get it.
But Michael, does our government reflect our populace right now, as far as the makeup, the diversity, the different genders? I mean,
no, but if you know the history, it really never has. And it survived. What is it? The worst form of government except all others? Yeah, it has its flaws, but I'll take it. Listen, I'll take it over where we're going and where the discussion is now. It troubles me because I believe in democracy. Cannabis should be the one unifying issue between Republicans and Democrats. It's one of the few things, when you look at some of the bills, like safe banking is a perfect example, where there's just broad support. You never see that. Everything tends to be partisan. And this is the one thing that is unifying the left and the right in DC. I want to see more of it. It's just, I'll be honest with you. It's November of 2022, and in January of 2021, I had a lot higher hopes of the next 18 to 20 months, and is not played out as well as I thought. And I'll be honest with you. I'll talk to you in a couple weeks, and I'll see if we can blame Democrats or if they can get this over the finish line.
I don't like the word blame, and I don't like the word fault. It's a
Yeah.
process, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, I mean it is, but so I have to go through my vocabulary to find a better word than blame.
Well, but look, I mean, when you look at the history of cannabis law reform in the United States Congress, blame and fault are totally applicable. Look at Mitch McConnell. Look at people who've completely stopped any positive legislation from passing through the Senate. We have had to shoehorn anything positive about cannabis in on spending bills as a rider in order to get it through the halls of both houses. So there's a lot of fault and blame that can be assigned to specific individuals who absolutely put the brakes on anything positive for a while. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the DC expert.
No, it's totally correct. At the same time, um, as a lobbyist, I'm not going to gain any friends on the Hill by trashing one person or one senator if they're still not retired. I can trash them when they retire or a day after I retire, but I still have to work through their offices. And listen, if their constituents keep electing them, that's the people I have to deal with, as much as I disagree with them. And if history shows, it's going to be I think, a good election for Republicans, which could be bad for cannabis reform. And so we need to keep working these offices. I can't just throw up my hands and say, okay, Republicans are in charge and they all suck on this issue. My first 6 years doing this was all Republicans in charge and trying to get Rohrabacher, Farr, and other stuff over the finish line. It's just more of a challenge. But listen, we've had 2 years of Democratic control, and minus what Biden did a couple weeks ago, there hasn't been a ton going on. And so,
They treat it like it's an evil, a necessary evil topic that they have to deal with. The necessary evil weed topic, if you will.
We've had that problem in Michigan too. For during the Snyder administration, they had what's called a trifecta, where they controlled the governor's office and the state house and the state senate, and we had to try and push positive cannabis law reform through that particular keyhole during 8 years of the Snyder administration. So absolutely, on a statewide level, I'm experiencing what you have experienced on a federal level.
So politics is one thing. Business is a completely different entity, where the almighty dollar continues to dictate movement on the political scene as well as in the economic scene. And the number one issue in everybody's mind when they go to the polls is the most recent bout with inflation in this country. Despite all that, there is still merger and acquisitions going on, not only in the cannabis space, but in other parts of the country as well, in other elements of industry. But we do have a breaking story, a news story that broke today, which means it didn't make our Weed Talk News, which is put together overnight on Thursdays. It will be, however, talked about now because it's a pretty big deal. And it has to do with Sean Diddy Combs. He's a rapper, businessman, he's a producer, and he's buying, well, Cresco Labs and the Commonwealth, isn't that who Columbia Care and Cresco Labs is who this guy is buying out. So now you're going to have a multi-state operator with an African-American heritage. This is a good thing for the industry, isn't it, Michael?
Well, I think it's a great thing. And I had actually heard the rumor yesterday at lunch. A friend told me something was going down, and I wasn't able to connect the dots until you finished it. And so it makes sense. Now, I don't know if they're buying these MSOs. They're probably buying their assets in certain states, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, they're acquiring all the
actually,
Massachusetts Cresco Labs properties. Yeah.
So it's a Massachusetts play. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not touching Pennsylvania, Ohio, California, Nevada, Arizona, or the Michigan properties. I looked them up on the SEC before the show today. So there's still a huge chunk of Cresco that remains that won't be under Diddy's control. So he's not buying out the entirety of the operation. He's buying a chunk. And I think that goes to the hesitation in the industry. A big company like this would never want to sell off 1/3 of its assets unless there was some instability within the marketplace itself. And I think nationally, we're seeing price instability really drive companies to do things they wouldn't have considered doing 2 years ago.
Yeah, and if you look at the history of cannabis, we know the history was based on racism and the fact that, you're starting to see entities um, made up of people who weren't on the receiving end of the war on drugs, and they don't understand the nuances in the history. And we need ownership who can understand that history and the nuances, and who are able to have allow the industry to be representative and be diverse and equitable. And so we need more faces in industry that show its diversity. And so I think, once the details come out, I would like to go through it, but I think it can only be a win-win for cannabis and just the issue in general.
Yeah. The numbers being thrown around 185 million, and it's for the Massachusetts, New York, and Illinois 12 total properties. And it is his first investment in the cannabis space. Now, I'm going to read his quote because this is a very powerful quote. And Michael, you bring up the race factor because it is part of the whole cannabis history and story in this country and around the world too. This is a quote from Sean Diddy Combs. I got to tell you guys, I didn't know who this guy was. All right. Now I did know that I know the Sean John clothing. I think I have some underwear by Sean John, actually, but that's the only reason why I would know it. I'm sorry. I'm not very hip. Here's his quote. All right. And this is him speaking, not me. I'm just reading the words. My mission has always been to create opportunities for Black entrepreneurs and industries where we've traditionally been denied access. And this acquisition provides the immediate scale and impact needed to create a more equitable future in cannabis. Owning the entire process from growing and manufacturing to marketing, retail, and wholesale distribution is a historic win for the culture that will allow us to empower diverse leaders throughout the ecosystem and be bold advocates for inclusion. Wouldn't you like to hear that more often, guys?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, not only that, it's like putting their money where their mouth is, and the fact that they're actually, if you are trying to make money in cannabis and you throw a couple pennies to advocacy, I mean, great. But to actually put some money into advocacy and understand and make that connection and actually show diversity working and show equity operators in there, I think it's wonderful. It's only going to be win-win. And I think hopefully it'll inspire others. And hopefully it will, speed along the process. It's I can't say I have the money to be able to do that. I wish I had $100 and something million where I could throw around. But I think it's going to be great.
I got a Powerball ticket.
Powerball.
After I leave here, I'm going to go buy a couple Powerballs.
Go buy a few tickets. That's great.
Here in the city in Michigan, we have Detroit. Detroit has lagged. It's actually only allowed medical marijuana, not adult use cannabis. And the reason that they've been behind is because they're trying to craft an ordinance that allows Detroiters, people that look like the populace in Detroit, to be successful in the industry. And they withstood several legal challenges, and the first ordinance was crashed. But what they're doing now, I think, is going to stick. And it is trying to accomplish exactly what P. Diddy said. Trying to make sure that the industry looks like the people that were the most penalized. 3.5, 3.6 times as likely to be arrested if you're an African-American person for cannabis crimes than if you're a Caucasian person. So when we look at the rectification of those problems, there are federal standards that can be done. There are state-based standards that can be done, but there are also local-based standards too. I think Chicago also took a big stab at trying to resolve social inequities in the cannabis industry as well. I'm not sure how well that worked out, but I can tell you I'm excited about what we're doing in Detroit to try and accomplish that mission.
Michael, last word. Hopeful, optimistic, scared, all of the above when we face this midterm elections right now?
Well, I mean, part of me is scared for democracy of what's going to happen when some of these yahoos come into power, and I can call them Yahoo insurrectionists because I see it. I've lived in DC and I worked on Capitol Hill and I've seen it, and it scares me when people attack democratic institutions in our democracy. And, cannabis reform is going to happen. It's happening at the state levels, it's happening at the local levels. I want Congress to come up and allow more of this to happen and speed it along. The last thing I want is for these bigger MSOs to buy up everyone as Congress twiddles their thumbs and do nothing on it. There's a lot of things Congress can do to speed it up. What Biden did a couple weeks ago was historic, but it's a thought right now, and it's in the government bureaucracy, and that's going to take a lot of time to work through. It's better than nothing, but you can't get like, oh, okay, legalization is going to happen in 12 months. It's not, but at least it's better than it could have been.
That's right. Hey, Michael Correa, always a pleasure to have you on. I so appreciate your commitment to this program, and I always enjoy your commentary. So you're welcome anytime.
Yeah, we'll see how things change in about 8 days, and we'll see what the turnout of the election is, and that'll change cannabis reform.
There you go. Hey, we're going to talk with some media moguls coming up in the next half hour, including JJ McKay from the Fresh Toast. So do not go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of Green Rush Live, our really live business of cannabis talk show here every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the regular host these days. Rick, by the way, anytime you'd like to jump in and take over this show, I'm pretty much putting you and Josh Kincaid on notice that at some point this is going to be your show. So I'm letting everybody know that
that's interesting to hear. What do you
all
know?
right. And then congratulations. Careful what you wish for. That's all I could say. Joining us this half hour is a gentleman who really, JJ, I hope you don't mind me calling you a legend in the media business, but you have definitely carved out a big niche in this space of media. People respect you. They love what you're able to put together on a regular basis, and we welcome you to this show. I know you've been on before, so welcome back, JJ McKay from Fresh Dosed. And
thank you so much. That's awfully sweet of you to say that.
There you go. Well, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. I try to, Rick Thompson has taught me this, to be a positive influence on people's lives. Right, Rick?
Oh, I taught you that. I think you probably learned it a couple of decades before I came along, but thanks for the credit, though. I appreciate it.
That's what I'm here for. And now I'm going to introduce you to Jamie Cooper. She's with Sensi Magazine. She, too, is out of Michigan. This has turned into a Michigan-based show. And Jamie is this is quite a title for you, by the way. Director of Industry and Community Development. Is that a fancy, what's that a fancy title for?
Pretty much just the relationships in the industry. Like I get to help partner with all the organizations throughout the industry and help support them, and they support us.
There you go. And I know you're involved with a lot of the Sensi Magazine afternoon networking groups that you guys put together on a somewhat regular basis. I love going into these networking groups because you never know who's going to show up in it. And it's usually people from all over the country. It's not like your backyard. And I tend to make contacts in there that end up being someone like Marianne Kersigi, who's our Oregon correspondent on We Talk News. I met her at a networking event online, and now she's working with us. I ran into her at the ArcView Investment Summit a couple of weeks ago, and we're happy to have her as well. But since we're going to talk about media, and JJ, you handed me this, it's a Benziga article, am I right?
Yes.
It says, what does the shakeup in the cannabis media industry mean for weeds mainstreaming? That's a headline that grabs your attention. Being in the media space in the cannabis industry, I've got to say, okay, not quite sure that would be how I would spin this, but JJ, you tell me, when you read the headline, is there a shakeup going on? Did I miss something?
I would say yes, I would say in the last 4 years, you've seen a significant change
4
in the
years.
industry.
Okay, good. I
So
thought it was like
it was
the last week or the last month. It hasn't been that fast, right?
Well,
Right.
but really, it's all come to ground in the last 6 months. Civilized has closed for a second time. Leafly their stock has dropped to 70 cents. You have Benzinga has come in with a force to the event, putting a big, which is hurting ArcView and becoming a competitor to MJBiz. You have, and then you have, like Mass Roots, which was a legacy, has now become a recycling company. So you have all this change. And when you looked at when legalization really started to sweep the country, some of the partners like Dope and Culture have gone by the wayside. And then High Times just is in the middle of that. Not only did they lose that lawsuit in California, but now they're having all that problem with Xfox, where they borrowed all the money and at a big interest rate, and they're having all that. So it is a big shakeup in the industry. But like the rest of the industry, we're being affected by the mainstreaming of it all. Because, people don't read beer magazines. People read an article or see something online about beer and then pick it up at Kroger. So, our role at the Fresh Toast is we go to where the consumer is. We don't make the consumer come to us.
Right. And that actually, you taught me that lesson in our first conversation earlier this week. I thought it was great. You really, and it's a similar mantra to when you are public speaking. You always want to know who your audience is, right? Same kind of thing. Jamie's nodding her head. It is so important to know not only who is watching or following you, but how that information is being delivered to them. Like, I know for a fact, 49% of our content is being distributed via mobile device. And I've been told that's actually a good number. Jamie, what's your view of media and the media space right now? And of course, Sensi's been around for a couple of years now in different pockets around the country. How is it going?
We've actually been around for 7 years now. We launched in Colorado first and then very quickly grew. I mean, like when I joined and started the Michigan magazine, I think we were up to 13 magazines. Now we're to 4. So that kind of gives you an idea, what has happened over the last 3 years at least. And I think it's all about evolution. It's understanding why people do purchase to advertise with you and evolve. You have to evolve with what's happening. Specifically in the Michigan market, we're seeing some massive saturation. So the first thing that the companies do that we typically do business with, they're cutting their budgets. But where they're cutting is they're focusing on revenue generating activities. And does an ad in a magazine produce revenue? No, it's more of a branding tactic. But what does produce revenue is the community-based events that we host. And honestly, that's really what sets us apart from anyone else, because those community-based events do drive sales. They drive relationship opportunities, collaboration opportunities, merger and acquisition opportunities. And so that's really why a lot of our network does invest into what we do.
Yeah. And we love those Sensi nights here in Massachusetts. And obviously, I've met your founder, Ron Kolb, in the past as well. And, I like everybody in this industry. That's just who I am. Rick, is her view of Michigan and that market accurate? I mean, you guys are both in the same state.
Oh, of course it is. And I'll tell you, when you're in a competitive state, not a state which has limited licensing, then there's more of a likelihood people are going to try and invest in media because they have a real advantage by doing so. When you have a limited market, let's talk about Florida with Trulieve that has 150 stores. Why would Trulieve need to advertise it? They're everywhere. But I think what we have de-emphasized a little bit is the leprosy that affected High Times magazine over the last 7-8 years when they shed a lifetime well-known names like Danny Danko and Dan Sky, Bobby Black. When some of those particular well-known individuals were let go from the company, we saw them stop having as much of a dominant effect in the marketplace. And for a while, I mean, for decades prior to legalization, High Times was the only accepted source for anything cannabis related. And now, as JJ mentioned, the market has become saturated with other sources, including mainstream media too. So as High Times has tried to migrate themselves away from being just a media and an information company and tried to go into a brick and mortars type of a scenario, I think the industry itself lost a lot of really prominent voices. And Danny Danko still doing Grow Your Own, and Dan Sky is Malcolm McKinnon, and he's in New York State doing wonderful things too. A lot of those personalities continued after High Times went down, but that was the flagship for decades of cannabis information. And when it went down, I think it took others with it, to be honest with you.
Good assessment.
I might, as handsome as Rick is, I might disagree with that a little bit.
Go for it.
Prior to legalization, or the wave of legalization, High Times owned the market, and I'm just making up numbers here, and that market was 1 million people, and they owned that. Once legalization began going on, that market was 20 million people, and 19 of those people didn't care what High Times had to say. 19 of the 19 million of those people wanted just something that would get high. And when you look at point of sales, it's not, the growth in the industry isn't stoners buying way much more. It's casual people buying edibles and vapes and other stuff and growing the market into more mainstream. And High Times, their biggest mistake is they didn't adjust to the growing market. They looked backward. Well, they did a lot of other things, but by letting those people go, they lost their existing audience, but they didn't grow the new audience. They didn't change and reflect on where the audience is.
So the audience, I think you and I talked about this. The fastest growing demographic group in cannabis is the 50-year-old plus group. All right. Now, this is a group that has been called the Canna Curious by a lot of people out there, because after all, if you're over 50, and some of us are even older than that, you are curious about what kind of things this particular plant might be able to do to enhance our wellness as we age. And there are quite a few options for that. But here's the biggest issue I have. And media has to do something about this. And I'm not talking about the cannabis media people. I'm talking about traditional media who continues to just embellish and exaggerate normal growth of a young industry like cannabis does. This is what traditional media does because they are sensationalists. They need to embellish and get people to read them and follow them. That's mass media. Mass media continues to look at the cannabis industry as, let's just say, less than credible. And how does that make you feel, JJ? It makes me feel pissed, to be honest with you.
Well, when you look at the industry, though, I mean, when you look at the big stories that have gone by, who do you have? You had Tilray, that prior to Canada going legal, their stock traded like a meme stock. They were trading at 1,000 times EBITDA for like 2 weeks. Then you have Medman, which was mocked on South Park. And you have a lot of leaders and you have a lot of people in the industry who are going out, who've now left cannabis and going into psychedelics, saying, oh, give me $1 million today, I'll give you $2 million in a year, which wasn't really true. Then you have, a Canopy Grow, a Columbia, you have these true and steady companies who don't get the media because they're just growing like a Unilever or a Procter & Gamble or a Diageo. So, I mean, our industry does have some headline grabbers because people have just been wacky in our industry. High Times being one of them.
I got to ask Jamie, you've been around the Sensi nights, certainly more involved in them than I am. Richie Guerra and Jake Boynton do a great job here in the Massachusetts and New England area. But has any traditional media outlet, maybe a business reporter from Michigan, have they ever shown up to a Sensi night and actually done flavor pieces or human interest stories or anything like that?
Absolutely. But
Good.
That's because I have a great relationship with the mainstream media in Michigan. I partner with MLive Media, which is the largest digital agency here in Michigan that also bought Cannabis 360. And I'm partnered with Cranes, who bought GR Magazine, Grand Rapids Magazine. It was Our Detroit that bought GR Mag. And then Cranes bought Grand Rapids Business Journal. I was the top 50 most influential women in West Michigan for Grand Rapids Business Journal. So they have embraced our industry. They're doing business with our industry. They're doing stories on our industry. Now, we don't see as many stories as we did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were just fresh with legalization. We still need to be in the news. We're still making headlines, sometimes in a bad way, unfortunately, but we're still making headlines and we're making some big moves in this industry. We need to start being treated accordingly too, and treated like regular businesses.
Yeah. And someone who has now, I don't want to say crossed over, but is certainly involved with a more traditional media approach is the editor of San Diego Magazine, Jackie Bryant, who joins us now. Jackie, you can't say I haven't forgotten about you, right? Because I keep inviting you every week to our show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And I appreciate it every time that you do. And it's great. I love to be here. And sorry I'm late. I think it was my internet. I kept getting kicked out. I think it was user error or internet error, but I'm here. So thank you.
Well, good. And we're talking about media. We're talking about the role media has played in this industry. Now that you are an editor of a San Diego magazine and someone who I know is pro cannabis, how do you, have you balanced that? Are you staying away from cannabis? How are you able to blend the two?
You know, I have to say, I'm in a really interesting position. My bosses, I think saw and respected what I was able to do in cannabis media and how I was able to bridge kind of like mainstream with traditional cannabis media. Because before I was reporting on cannabis, I was actually, I did a whole variety of other beats: labor, food, travel, restaurants, all sorts of things. And so I had a lot of mainstream media contacts. So when I started getting into more cannabis writing in a dedicated fashion, and when I really focused on that as my main beat for like 4 or 5 years, I already had those contacts. So I was able to be nimble within cannabis media, but I also was able to get placement, which is not always possible if you start out in cannabis media. So I was able to take like my old contacts and bridge them. So now that I'm in my new spot, what's really interesting, I've been loudly critical of California media in particular, especially the newspapers and mainstream media outlets, because none of them, not a single one, has a dedicated cannabis beat, which I think is ridiculous. It's the largest legal market in the world, right? And it's a huge opportunity for coverage, not just for business coverage, but policy, environmental. It only gets picked up piecemeal. So now in my new role, even though we are a lifestyle magazine, part of the reason I was brought on was to integrate cannabis media into our vertical, which would be the first time at San Diego Magazine, which historically is a very conservative magazine, actually. And I'm going to be starting a podcast and newsletter under the magazine's banner that has a national focus. So that, as far as I know, for a mainstream magazine anywhere, even in California, is going to be the first. So they're like, run with it, go do what you need. And obviously I'm pro cannabis, but I do believe that a healthy critical eye is needed to keep this industry on track. And so I support all level of investigative journalism and some of those negative headlines, because there's a lot of ugly stuff that happens in the cannabis world, but there's obviously a lot of good stuff. And I totally agree. It needs to be covered like a regular business, like any other industry.
You know, it's amazing to me.
Yeah.
The role of the public service announcement is completely foreign to traditional media as it relates to cannabis. They don't want any public education being using their media to share education.
That's just silly.
What's that?
Jimmy, that's just silly. That's not even what a public service announcement's about.
Okay, so tell me what a public service announcement's about.
Public service announcement is what the 4 networks are required to give to nonprofits to help out in the community. And when it's nonprofits, it's usually around the library. It's things like that have a wide-based community system. This is an industry that's pushing, and most of the nonprofits around the industry are really fixated around companies. And once again, we have to remember, up and through 2020, the income from the cannabis industry was $18 billion, $18 or $19 billion, which is about the same size as the income of Subway sandwiches. So when you break it out across the country, while California is the largest, it's still a small industry.
So,
yeah.
And to say there needs to be all this coverage around cannabis, we don't have all that coverage around, let's say, fast food, beer, and the closest, for 75% of the market, the closest comparable to cannabis is beer.
At least we just released a report that said cannabis is the 6th largest agricultural product in the United States of America. So yeah. I disagree that it's so small as to not deserve its own special channel.
And by the way, news item, it's now the #1 crop in Massachusetts, passing cranberries.
What do you got, like 100 acres in Massachusetts? Come on.
Right. So, it's a growth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Jamie's, what did I do? Did I tickle you? Why are you laughing so much? That
No,
wasn't
because
that
I said
funny,
you
was
only
it?
have 100 acres in Massachusetts completely. So
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
get you. All right. There was a diss on my state. Is that really what I missed? Is that what it was?
a little bit, maybe.
I'll let you get away with it. I want to go back to what you said, JJ. You know how many nonprofits there are in the cannabis space? The medical dispensary that's the #1 wholesaler in Massachusetts, Rev Clinics, is a nonprofit. You know, there are nonprofit educational programs out there all the time now involved with events in Massachusetts. So even to me, again, they're
And
just.
if you're major media, that's going up against.
Wait, if I'm major media, what'd you say?
But if you're major media, you're going up. They're also going up to Boys and Girls Club, the Boy Scouts, the Children's Hospital, the library, the American
Okay,
Heart Association.
and God, I
it's
love all
all the
those
same.
entities. Okay, that's great. They've been around for hundreds of years. Everyone on this show has heard those stories. Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life. If you could say the same kind of stories, and by the way, I know the boys clubs have that and girls clubs have had that influence on many people, okay, because I'm familiar with that program. But how is this industry ever going to be accepted as we move towards normalization if traditional media does not balance their reporting from sensational, oops, they screwed up by, something terrible happened in a cannabis space. Let's blow it out of proportion and lead our news with it. I get frustrated by it. I really do. People, I have not had one line.
Look, we show up.
Go ahead. Good, JJ.
We show up in dozens of newspapers every day answering those questions,
Right.
answering medical questions. So
I think you've carved out a beautiful niche in this. You've done a great job. That's why you're successful. You've reached the masses. People are familiar with your brand. That's great.
But a lot of times, and this is what High Times' original problem was, is they felt the public should come to them and be an evangelist to them rather than go to the consumer and answer what their question is. People don't say, oh my God, I'm suddenly going to smoke weed. A lot of people say, oh, I wonder if smoking weed will help me sleep, help me lose weight, help with my GERD, whatever. And that's where, but we don't talk about that. We're like, oh, you got to, embrace it. So you have to think about what the consumer wants. How many beer magazines are there in the U.S.? How many consumer beer magazines are there in the U.S.?
Oh, there's quite a few, but beer has been around, since the 30s, right? I mean, that's the whole point here. This is a new product, and go ahead.
This is false equivalency. Cannabis was illegal, and bringing an industry from the dark to the light requires so much more than just consumer focused coverage. It requires policy coverage, environmental coverage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
But once again, that has to be profitable for organizations for them to exist. And in this world today, media is having a harder time with the profitability, and the cannabis industry isn't spending that much. If the cannabis industry wants it to be big, they have to invest big in it.
Well, they have to be allowed to invest big in it because many media companies simply won't accept cannabis dollars for fear of federal repercussions. I mean, that's just a fact. Unfortunately, we could have a bigger impact. What's a $2 million industry just in Michigan? So the amount of marketing money out there is really amazing.
Yeah. And again, traditional media.
But ask Cincy.
Go ahead, JJ.
Ask Cincy, do y'all have people just throwing money saying, get us out there as much as possible?
No, we don't. And especially right now, like economically, we're running into some challenges no matter what type of business you own. And
Right.
So budgets are tight right now. They're cutting back in certain areas. And the only way these media companies will evolve is if they or will be successful is if they evolve with the changes. You can't expect to stay afloat if you don't change your ways and evolve and understand what your buyer needs and what they want.
Look, guys, the consumer. Go ahead, Jackie.
Another thing, marketing,
Jamie.
like in traditional industries, companies will spend a lot more on marketing than these cannabis businesses do. I mean, they're facing 280E, they're facing the green tax, so they don't spend as much on marketing. And then sometimes you have these big companies come in and they are spending a ton of money on marketing, and it's Rick's heard me use this analogy before, but if you have two radios in a room and you turn one down and you turn one up, the up being increasing marketing budget, the one turning down is decreasing marketing budget, who are you going to hear?
Right. No, and actually, a lot of people will advise you in a down economy, that is actually the best time to get your product out there, right? We're
Take
all
that
nodding.
market share.
Jackie, how is it going
yeah.
at San Diego Magazine?
It's good. I mean, we are a 75-year-old legacy media brand that got new owners a year ago. The food critic and his wife bought the magazine, which is a story that doesn't really happen in media anymore. We're printing, we're good, things are good. I have the full opportunity to write about cannabis as much as I want. I truthfully don't take it, and it's not influenced by ad money or anything like that. It's actually just like solely my decision, and it is because I don't think it has the critical mass saturation that requires dedicated coverage in the way that I would cover, let's say, the arts in San Diego, for example. So I pepper it in a little bit, either digital or print every month, every other month. And I think that right now, that's kind of the appropriate pace for getting that into mainstream coverage. I think I just don't know that there are enough people reading that magazine, truthfully, who are like, big time potheads like I am, to be perfectly honest, who need that kind of dedicated coverage as like a strict vertical. So I'm wading into it slowly and kind of gauging the tolerance and interest of the audience, frankly. It's actually, we're getting more ad money requests for it and for more coverage, but I'm still trying to gauge our readership, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's there yet. So I actually have full reign to really play with it as I want, but I've been holding back, which is kind of interesting because usually I'm like rah, 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 like full speed ahead. So I've been doing it in a metered way.
There you go. It does look like that we're looking at New Jersey at night with JJ McKay, because I think that's where he's from. And we may have lost his signal. What'd you say?
Well, that's it. Hold on. I said, I'm in Seattle.
Seattle. So it's Seattle at night because there's no video. Okay. It's just, it's like the postcard you'd see where it was just a black one, right? You guys remember that, right? That's all. It was a kind of a joke.
It's 1:57 there.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, first of all, guys, we're up against the hour, and we do have a pretty big guest coming on at 5 o'clock. And I want to thank everybody for putting in their two or 3 cents on this, because media is changing as fast as the cannabis industry is changing. The consumer now is in charge. Our jobs as content producers is to engage with our audience. JJ's right. Know who your audience is and know how to engage with them is probably going to be the secret to success in all of our media outlets, wherever we are. So I do want to thank JJ McKay from the Fresh Toast, and Jamie, it's good to see you, not in a Zoom call on a networking event. So that's good. And Jackie, I really do enjoy your presence on our show. And when it becomes time for you to actually start hosting that show and you're looking for distribution or promotion, I certainly hope you'll remember us, because we'd love to talk with you about how we might be able to get involved with that.
I won't forget to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rick, don't go away. And when we come back, everybody, it's Chris Walsh. You know who he is. He's the CEO of MJBizCon, only the largest cannabis convention, trade show, party in the world. It's coming to Las Vegas in just a couple of weeks, and he'll be with us after this break. Don't go away.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is the rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is the rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time. As a broker, we have access to many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Welcome back to another Friday edition of Green Rush Live, really live from our world headquarters outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in Clinton, Massachusetts. And I had some visitors earlier today that will be on our 5:30 show that have a great story to tell. And we actually took a picture, and I did send it to our director, Dan, but I have never found out if he actually got it and might be able to put it up there at some point, not now, but when more comes on, we'll have that. We are waiting for Chris Walsh from MJBizCon to join us. There was a little communication snafu with the link, but we are efforting getting him the link as we speak, and we will be able to welcome in and talk a little bit about the MJ Biz Daily group and also MJBizCon, the biggest trade show for cannabis in the world. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, joined alongside by Rick Thompson this particular week from Michigan. And there is our pal and friend, and he's ready to go. Hi, Chris.
Hey there. Sorry, I didn't have a link to get in here, so I was
I
scrambling.
sent you a link when I first booked you, but that's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
It wasn't in the invite. I blame you. I'm sure you did.
I have learned that there are people that you have to make sure that you send them the right calendar invite with the Zoom link inside it, because that's how people find stuff, right?
That would
Is that
be me.
accurate?
Yes.
All right. Well, Chris, I don't, have you ever met Rick Thompson from Michigan? He's been to your show a few times.
Rick, have we met in person? I'm not sure.
Not in person, no, but I think
Okay.
we've been broadcast before, Chris, and it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
All right. So you're up against it, Chris Walsh. You've got what, less than 10 days, maybe, or 13 days to go. Tell me, is the countdown beginning? How anxious are you? What does the turnout look like? Give us a up-to-date update on MJBizCon coming up in just a few weeks.
Yeah. Before I start, I want to preface it with my daughter is home. I don't have a sitter today, so she's listening to some story in the background here that's fairly loud. So if you hear like a fairy tale in the background, that's not my normal kind of background working music. My daughter's back there. No, we're excited for the show. I mean, it's this is a big production. We work on it year round. Already have to start working on next year's pretty soon here too. But the industry is going through some growing pains right now, as we discussed last time. So we're expecting a big surge as we get closer. We should have over 30,000 attendees, could be 35. You just don't know in this industry. People like to plan last minute, and with the elections coming up, we're hoping that we'll get a sweep there or close to a sweep for the industry with legalization, and that always spurs a lot of interest in the conference as well right after the election. So we're gearing up. We're ready to roll. We're going to have I think over 1,300 exhibitors and a lot of new things as well. And the hype has begun. The countdown is on, and every time I go on LinkedIn, someone's talking about speaking at it or going to it or exhibiting at it. So glad we could help create that ecosystem for the industry.
I would guess that I get between 6 and 12 requests for interviews on a daily basis that are people that are going to MJBiz. So it is still the event in the industry to be at. Chris, you guys have done an amazing job. And I know the beautiful thing about when you have success is you guys try to keep it going, try to maintain success, try to reinvent yourself almost every year. And you made some changes at your last one. And I believe you're also doing the same thing here. So you're kind of categorizing different parts of the convention center. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, we call it segmentation. And, over the years, the big complaint has been as the event has grown, you got 30,000 people walking around a giant show floor, and it's hard to kind of find what you need. And it's harder for the exhibitors to stand out. So we were able to segment the show floor into broad categories: business services, cultivation, retail, some extraction, processing, so that people can go to a designated area of the show floor, and all the companies involved in that space will be there. So we hope that's going to help people navigate this massive event. And we're also trying to spur a little bit more fun. So it's business event, but we've got some lounges, we've got an outdoor patio with food trucks and DJs and some games, and trying to evolve or what we offer the industry as well. So it's not just strictly buttoned up business.
No, in fact, I've got the list of parties right here in front of me, and I'm going to 9
pages long.
22, 23, something like that. And I think that's interesting, that you should take pride in the fact that not only are you driving people to your convention, but think about what the impact you have on the economy in Las Vegas. You're not just a one-stop pony anymore, right? You impact a day's worth, a week's worth of activities around that convention that are probably as important as far as schmoozing goes as the actual convention itself.
Yeah, and I think when I mentioned ecosystem earlier, I'm happy that we could help create that for the industry, because when we started, it didn't have anything like this. There was no professional gatherings at all, 11 years ago, like this. So, we've grown along with the industry, and we credit the industry for much of our ability to do this, of course. But I love the spin-offs and the fact that people come and you can get your business primarily done during the day. And then there's always, a list of after parties. You're figuring out where to go. Companies invest a lot of money in them. There's some really cool ones. And like you said, a lot of times you can get a lot of business done at those too.
Right.
Sharing a drink or a joint, wherever it is, or just talking, meeting people. And so I'm happy. It's funny. I'll go there and I'll take a cab and mention what I do if they ask. Not when I'm there for MJBizCon, when I'm there to speak at another event or visiting. And sometimes the cab drivers are like, "Oh yeah, I know that show." Like that week, because it kind of spreads across the strip, and we're known. The cannabis industry is known. That's its week in Vegas, right? And it takes over the city. So that's kind of cool as an industry that we're that big and we're that legit.
And you're in a spot that is welcoming the industry and is trying, actually, there's quite a few companies that are now based in Las Vegas. They're opening up, they've already approved social clubs, even though they won't be open and ready and legal for this particular show. But it's a nice place to be when you're doing this kind of thing. It's an adult playground, Chris. Of course it's fun.
Of course the weed industry's event is there. No, when we first moved to Vegas and decided to anchor our event there was some pushback, and people said it was just medical then, right? And it wasn't a very good program. I don't even think it was very regulated. It was just kind of messy. But we just kind of tried to play the long game and felt like as a convention destination, Vegas is good. Some people hate Vegas, right? But a lot of people like it. I think it fits with the spirit of this industry. And it's proved to be a great strategic move for us because, consumption lounges, right? You just mentioned, those haven't really been a thing anywhere in the country. They haven't been done well or done right. Vegas and Nevada are kind of leading the way. So we hope as those open to really have strong partnerships with them at the next MJBizCon, right? So, you go to MJBizCon and you can't smoke, right? The convention center doesn't allow it. You can't have flower, people are doing stuff. We all know that. But, to be able to collaborate with the consumption lounges to bring that element as part of the show off the show floor where it's allowed and legal, I think it's gonna be really cool down the road.
There you go. Rick, I know you're chomping at the bit. I'm going to let you take a couple of questions for Chris. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's great. First of all, I think you're right when you talk about rewarding your attendees by the fact that there's a consumption lounge close enough that they can still convention and 420 at the same time. That's been the dream everyone's had. And even every casino in the United States of America would love to be able to do that. But as federal property, you can't allow any of that on there. But you did mention something that I thought sort of flew under the radar, but I think it's worthy of a little conversation. You're going to cluster similar companies together in different regions of the convention. Now, typically, we like to put other people between competitors so that they're not right next to each other. How has the reception been amongst your vendors to this new development?
I think that's a great question because the reason we hadn't done it in the past, I remember talking about this in 17 or 18 internally and saying, hey, this is getting unwieldy. The exhibitors pushed back pretty hard for the reasons you just said. They said, I don't want to be next to my competitor, or I don't want to be lumped in one area. I do 5 things and I have to pick one and then I won't be seen over here. But the reality of the situation is, and this is common in every other industry for large trade shows, what we're doing, it's very common. You go to CES, they have it down to a science for the Consumer Electronics Show. The reception has been kind of a slow warm up and we'll see how it goes. Some are really eager for it, but the whole thing is, if the attendees can't find you, what good is it to be there? So if you're next to a competitor, good, game on. Like you're going to be having your A1 sales pitch and you're going to be in another area. But if you're looking at it from the attendee perspective, who you're ultimately trying to get as an exhibitor, this is huge. If you're looking for, cultivation equipment and it's spread out over this massive show floor, it's just kind of a hodgepodge of what you come across. Maybe you see something in the exhibitor list and you could miss people that way. But if you're going over there and there's, all the greenhouse companies, again, it's kind of, that's just the reality of it. But for attendees, and that's who we're focused on with this, which ultimately benefits the exhibitors, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
I love the phrase slow warm up. That was wonderful. I attended a conference earlier on in the teens here in Michigan, and Green Buddha Seeds had just ridiculously huge display. Took like 4 spaces. It was monstrous. And it seems like with MJBizCon, the size of your after party sometimes determines a corporate identity. Would you agree that some of the biggest companies are throwing some of the biggest parties?
Well, it's what we've seen in evolution in the industry, and this is widespread, but we see it on our level, but it's a part of a bigger picture, is that the recognition of the value of branding and developing your brand and the sophistication now involved in that. You know, it used to be companies, when I put it in the trade show perspective, just getting a booth was a booth and they didn't really know what to do with it, or, you know, and now as it's gotten more competitive, the industry, as it's grown, people are investing a lot more time and money into doing cool things with their booth. One had a hot tub there once, you know, or they have like a, you know, an ice luge or something, you know, they're trying to stand out, right? And so the after parties and sponsorships of things like that outdoor patio area with the DJs and stuff, you're building that brand and you're building that name recognition. And that wasn't really what companies did very well or put a lot of money into 6-7 years ago. So as the industry's evolved, we've just seen the demand from exhibitors change as well. And these after parties, to your point, are a great way, especially if kind of you're more of a consumer facing company and not as heavy on the B2B side. Right. You know, you can get all these people in and they're going to remember the blank party, you know, because it was awesome. And so they'll remember your company.
I was going to say, they remembered the party though. So does that make it a good party? I mean,
maybe they, yeah, right. Well, that's the danger, right? You host the best party in town and people might not just remember who hosted it.
Look,
when
I get it.
420, we remember. When people booze, they forget. So
yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, unless I write people's names down and follow up on it, you know, now you walk around with your phone and your business cards, and now at least you can take notes on, okay, now who did I just talk to?
Yeah.
Because you meet so many people in such a short period of time. And I don't know about you, I'm a male, guys. And, you know, selective listening is part of our gender. Okay. Right. I mean, it just is. I don't know about you, but I get crap for that. All right. I definitely do. I don't know if you guys are all smiling, so you know what I'm talking about here. That being said, when you're on a business event, you don't want to forget who you just talked to. So, you know, it's always a challenge. But I do want to go back to the state of the industry for a second, Chris, because that's always your thing the first day when you welcome everybody and you give a state of the industry address. And collaboration versus competition. Here in Massachusetts, everybody knows what's been going on. You watch it. It's 4 years into its adult use program now, 240, 50 odd dispensaries, plenty of medical programs, plenty of trade shows, lots of space, lots of grow. It's becoming more competitive. This is an open market after all. This is an agricultural product after all. Are you starting to see the ugliness of competition, or are you starting to see the favorable collaboration in the industry?
I see a bit of it all, right? And I think without giving it away, part of what I'm going to talk about in the state of the industry is right now, you know, we have a tale of 2 industries or 3 industries or 4, and it depends on a lot of factors. So you hear all this pain going on, but that's depends on geography. It depends on your business structure. It depends on a lot of things. And there's other areas or other companies that are doing just fine, and they're not feeling the pain that everyone talks about at the conferences. And they all, you know, all the people in California are so down on the industry, and now in Michigan and in Colorado. But if you're in a new market, you're like, this is awesome, you know, and that's your focus. Or if you're a small local place and you've got a, you know, you got a very limited license state and you've got one of those licenses, you're doing just fine right now. So to your point, I think it just depends where you are, and competition is good, as we all know. I keep you on your toes. In some states, there's going to have to be a culling. They're just going to have, and these ones with wide open licenses where it's very easy to get in, you know, that's what survival of the fittest is, and it's going to be painful. And it's going to be difficult. And so your trade-off in like a Michigan is if they had just come out with, hey, we're only going to give 50 licenses. And then everyone complained you can't get in. But those 50 companies would probably be doing really, really well, like Florida, right? Where only basically a handful, you know, 24 companies have licenses. And, you know, so Trulieve has, you know,
most of them
domination of the market, right? And they're doing fine there. So, you know, if you're in a market, the ship has sailed, the regulations are out there. Yeah, you're going to have to compete. And there are ugly sides to that. But honestly, what industry isn't like that?
Especially in a open market society and capitalism and all that. That's the idea. You're letting the market dictate the size of it, but there's always going to be challenges and growth. And if anybody's ever started a company, I don't care in what industry, there's a ton of challenges with startups. All right. Yeah. interesting news item that broke today. And, we like to do a news show that follows this live show every week on Friday at 6 o'clock. And this broke today, so it's not part of our news. So I've incorporated it into our live discussion here. And it has to do with the acquisition by Sean Diddy Combs of a $185 million deal for Cresco Labs and Columbia Care for 12 locations in Massachusetts, New York, and Illinois. This is a great sign, I think, when you have a African-American business person putting money into the industry to help the industry, because he hears these horror stories of others that are in the social, economic, and empowerment programs trying to get out from under, trying to get into it, and they just can't. And now at least there's going to be some more friendly investment money or retail money, jobs available because of the leadership of Mr. Diddy himself. Did you know? You knew about this, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. I agree. I mean, I think this is significant, and there's a couple reasons why. And you touched on them, is that when we've seen a lot of celebrities get involved, they're the face of the company. They're the one they trot out at the trade show or on their packaging. And a lot of times they're not really tied to the business. And they're not like, even Jim Belushi is out there chasing gophers off his outdoor grow. Like, he got hands-on, right, with cultivating, but a lot of them aren't that way. Right. And what I like about this is you have a celebrity making a massive investment to own a fairly substantial company now that he's creating with these assets, and own them and run them. And that not only that, he's saying, I'm doing this for another purpose, right? Another reason. It's a good investment in his idea, and he's getting into a new industry, and he's a business-minded guy now. But he's doing it for the reasons you mentioned, to help others get involved in the industry who haven't been able to get involved. And I think that level of influence in the industry and in this size of a company that he's creating is significant. So it's moves like this that show you, hey, there are ways to increase diversity in the industry, and people stepping up that already have the money, that have already been successful, and taking the reins, of businesses in this industry is one way to do it, because he's going to come in, and that's going to be his focus, is not only running a successful business, but doing it with, giving people opportunities. And so I love it. I mean, I really love it. And it's not just him saying, oh, Diddy's got a new line of coming out with his face on it, like, who cares about that? This could actually make a difference. And also the last element of this is just continue to see the mainstream come in, right? And Diddy, I remember the days when the only celebrities were involved were the Cheeches and Chongs, or a lot of the celebrities that were popular 30 years ago that fell off the face of the radar. You're like, oh, they're still alive. And then they're like with a cannabis brand or something, right? And then you started getting some more current celebrities, right? And now you got like big people coming in, and this can only help further this to make it more legitimate.
Chris,
and equitable, and with an opportunity for those who've been most impacted on the war on drugs. Everybody likes to point the finger at the big MSOs, Chris, that this is, they're the evil ones. They're the ones that are on it just for the money and all this. How important is a group of multi-state operators for a young industry like cannabis?
How important is a group of them?
Yeah, having actually successful MSOs in business, kind of fueling the lobbyists, fueling the industry, fueling the growth of it, because they have the money.
That's a snake's den, or a nest. I don't think snakes live in a den. Long day, long week. But no, to your point, every industry has the powerhouses that can help change laws and sway laws. And so this industry needs that kind of money and focus, which has always been more of a grassroots type of thing, with the MPPs of the world, really taking that on, an activist type mentality, and not necessarily the businesses driving that discussion. So on one hand, that is really good, and it's going to be needed. On the other hand, if it's only the MSOs and they're dominating the discussion, they're going to have market structures that benefit them, and they're going to influence the laws in ways that benefit them. And it might not benefit the small business owner. It might not benefit the mom and pops. They don't want, too many licenses, because they think they'll get them and then control the market, more or less. And some of the CEOs of MSOs are saying, no, we're all about this and this. remains to be seen if they really are, they're going to influence the laws, right? And so we might see change that they help introduce, but it might not be good change for everybody, and likely won't be for everybody.
So you've got the MSOs, and then you've got your craft growers. And I'm pretty sure I read something about how the craft grower and the craft brewer in beer could be very similar as far as development goes. How do you view that? And everyone that I know, and this is what I've heard, the multi-state operator weed is here and the craft growers weed is here because it's easier to grow smaller, better plants. I think that's what I've been learning. Am I wrong here?
Well, I mean, it's like anything, if you're a small batch brewer and you can innovate quicker, you can experiment, you can really put your time into your top really high quality beers, right? The same thing is true here. So I agree with that analogy, and I've been on that train for years, saying that hopefully the industry evolves where you're going to have the mass produced cannabis by the big companies that are in every state and everyone knows them, but that there's going to still be substantial room for the craft, locally grown, maybe sun grown, like whatever it is that you're doing very uniquely across the country. And I do think that's how it will evolve. I don't see any reason that it wouldn't, unless all those smaller ones go out of business because they can't compete. But if they're really producing high quality, in demand flower and strains, they're going to find a place.
One thing I'll say is that it's difficult for a brand to develop a national identity because each individual state requires cultivation inside that state itself. So you may have, let's say, a Jeter that's produced in California that's really done by great guys, and a Jeter produced in Michigan done by some moderate guys, and it's not nearly the same experience. So when you're talking about establishing a national brand, that's a real restriction because it's not like the McDonald'sization of cannabis as we were worried about, because your double cheeseburger tastes exactly the same no matter what state you're in. The one thing I'll say also, you've got to, as far as the Diddy story goes, oftentimes we've seen African Americans do collaborations with existing companies. We've also seen Al Harrington and Megatron form their own companies and jump off in that direction. But for Diddy to buy his way into the market at the $185 million level, that's what I think really sets this particular acquisition apart from any other experiment or any other successful venture that's been launched by an African American. Chris, can you recall anything else of this magnitude that would have this kind of social ramification?
No, you bring up a great point. That is how it's unique. And the sheer size and scale of it too. Not only the acquiring into the industry versus kind of starting from the ground up. No, I haven't seen that. I know Jay-Z was, starting a big investment fund, but it's I don't know how we've heard that kind of thing before, and sometimes you never hear about it again. That was kind of a unique way to fund the companies, right? That are going to need money and that are going to hopefully be the leaders in the future. But no, I haven't seen anything like this, and it'll be an experiment. Like, is he going to be able to run these effectively? And his team, like, obviously he needs a team. I don't know how hands-on he's going to be in this. Is he going to be, in there every day? Probably not. Is he really the high level kind of keep the strategy and focus and just hiring an operations and exec team around him? So we'll see. Just because he bought it doesn't mean he'll be successful too. And so we all need to, hopefully he can figure this out, because it would be a real shame if he buys it and he's not successful.
Well,
Right.
the one thing is that because of his declarations right at the onset of this purchase about social equity, he'll be under the microscope as far as the composition of his leadership team and his stores as well too. If his ideals at the onset don't actually match the hiring practices his company is able to successfully do, this won't be a great experience for P. Diddy. But let's just acknowledge that he really is a very successful businessman in many different venues.
Yep.
So it's a great addition to the industry as far as I'm concerned, because you're someone with a pre-existing success pattern who's really getting in a big way.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
I'd be remiss if I didn't get one more comment about the President of the United States actually mentioned the word, well, he used marijuana, but he recognized that the laws were wrong, the descheduling is screwed up. And while we can get into the whether or not he pardoned 6,500 names or people, because we don't know. I'm still waiting to talk to somebody who did get pardoned in that 6,500 list. Okay. That being said, we all live to hear the day that the leader of the free world gave respect in a lot of ways that this industry exists. It deserves some help in changes to the laws and the structure of what they've actually been able to avoid and overcome and become a legitimate business. And while the economy is the biggest issue to many voters as they go to the polls on Tuesday, seems to me, if you've got an industry that has job growth, revenue growth, tax growth, this will be helpful. If it may even stave off a recession. Chris, what did you think about the whole Biden and cannabis mention that he mentioned a few weeks ago?
I thought it was fantastic. And, I put something on LinkedIn and someone was like, oh, this is BS. He didn't go far enough. This is just lip service. And I'm like, I get it. If he did it for political reasons, I don't care. I don't care, because we've never had a sitting president acknowledge that there needs to be change. And that's what he came out to say. It wasn't wrapped in some long conversation about something. He just like snuck it in somewhere. This was his message, his specific message he came out to announce. And so regardless of if it's 6,000, if it mattered, like whatever, he's addressing it. He's putting in he's laying the groundwork for future change, whether it comes from him or not. This is this to me, it's a historic part of the big history of the cannabis industry. This is one of those things on the timeline that stands out a little bit. It's
like
not
the Cole memorandum, exactly.
Yeah, it's not like the Cole memo and all that. It's not panacea. Maybe nothing else specifically comes from this, right? Maybe he says they're going to look into rescheduling, and then we never hear it about again, and then he's out of office. I have no idea. But the fact that we're having the conversation at the highest levels of government in this country, finally someone saying something about this and saying he's going to do something, I think is huge. It's just like when one chamber in Congress passes a cannabis bill. It's like, okay, yeah, the other one's not going to pass it, but hey, this is one of the, it's steps, it's incremental steps, right? And this fits in that big picture of these incremental steps. Without the ones before it, Biden wouldn't have said this, right? He wouldn't have gotten here because of all the steps like this that happened before it. So this is one of those steps. It's a big one. We'll see what happens, but I love it.
We've lived to see the day that a Supreme Court judge recognizes that there's an inconsistency between the federal and the state laws, and a sitting president. So this is all progress as far as I'm concerned. Chris Walsh, best of luck down in Vegas. My heart and spirit will be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Wish you could attend this year, but thank you guys. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
You bet. There goes Chris Walsh from MJBizCon. He's got a lot of work to do. We're going to let him go, and we're going to have our final half hour after this. Don't go away.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is your rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years, and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time. As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
All right, welcome back to the final half hour of the really Green Rush Live show, the Business of Cannabis talk show that we do here on Pro Cannabis Media every Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And remember, this is the weekend. Of course, you may be watching it really live, or you may be watching it on demand later on. This is the weekend. You're going to turn your clocks back. To me, it's an extra hour of partying. What can I say? I remember the days when I had the fraternity house, and we always had a party on this weekend because we celebrated at 2 a.m. going back to 1 a.m. so that we would have an extra hour to party. That's what you do when you're 20-something years old. I'm not. I'm Jimmy Young. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Rick Thompson is alongside. He is the executive director of the Michigan division of Normal. And joining us in our final half hour is a gentleman named Joe Lusberg. He is with Upwise Capital. I have seen him just about at every show that I've been at over the last couple of years. I know some of his staffers. They're always there. How is business going, Joe? And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Business is going great. Thank God. Company is growing. We are gearing up for MJBizCon. We are ready. We have a booth at Cannabis this year, and I'm speaking on day 2 on the rise of debt capital financing. The equity markets are tough, so debt capital is on the rise now. So we're doing well, thank God, and helping a lot of operators get built out. Obviously, Massachusetts is a big market for us, so we see you everywhere we go.
Absolutely. And, this program actually has more viewers in Michigan, New York, California, and Texas than it does in Massachusetts. But that's okay, too. You know what? That too will change as we continue.
New Yorker, so love that we have some New Yorkers watching, right?
That's right, absolutely. And more Stringer. Now, I've read your story, but I really think it would be great. First of all, tell us about the product you've got, and then I really want to hear your personal story because it's so compelling, and it's one that we all hear at various trade shows or interviews with people that we talk to that have been impacted by this failed war on drugs. You, sir, have got your stripes for sure. You've earned it. So tell us a little bit, about your product first, more. Go ahead.
Yes. So I have the first full spectrum cannabis energy shot on the market. I'm excited about that. I'm an athlete, lifetime athlete, and I'm 40 plus years old. So loving the energy. I especially love the mind boosting properties of this formula. We have the neurotropics in there. That's the brain boosting energy. There's so many different pathways to energy in the body. And one of those is mental stimulation. So we got the 100 milligrams of caffeine in there, vitamin B6, B12, B3 in there, plant-based amino acids. And that's my energy shot. And there's more to come. So that's under Shakti Greenlit. And that's where we're going to be releasing these health type products, to boost your quality of life. So yeah, I'm from Long Island, New York too, originally.
Oh, me too. Nice.
Freeport, Long Island. That's where I had my first cannabis arrest at 14 years old by the duck pond, by Freeport High School.
Nice. I know that area.
I was charged as an adult for sale to a minor. So it was a kid younger than me. He was 13, I was 14, and I was charged as an adult. It still blows my mind that these adult men thought it was okay to charge a child with that type of charge. They could have charged me with anything. The biggest thing is what's the interpretation of those police officers on the ground. Another thing that people don't know about me, my father was the first Black cop in Freeport, New York, where I grew up at. Yep. My uncle said he was the first Black cop. Maybe there was some other Black cops, but to my knowledge, MacArthur Stringer, my father was the first Black cop in Freeport, New York. Nice. And I think Black law enforcement is important. in a time where, it was predominantly white cops and stuff, you do need Black law enforcement. So sometimes you get a bad rep in our community for being Black law enforcement, but I think it's prevalent that all of these nationalities and people were able to participate in law enforcement. My father was one of the first ones to participate in that where I'm from.
Are you applying for the card license?
I absolutely did.
Nice.
I absolutely did apply for the card license. I have 3 legacy arrests in New York as a child, actually.
Wow.
Joe, how many of these types of stories do you hear on a somewhat regular basis when people come to you looking for funding for their invention or their venture or whatever it is?
Every day of the week. We're number 1 or number 2 on Google for any cannabis keyword, cannabis debt financing, cannabis equipment, cannabis real estate. So, we're very active in the market. I'm from New York, so the East Coast is definitely a game changer to cannabis industry. So we're seeing a lot of deals now in New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, all the new states that are coming on. We're starting to see those operators come to us. In New York, the card license has that $200 million fund. So they're supposedly giving out real estate to the applicants, right? But also as well, we're not sure if that's true. My brother is actually a card applicant as well. My brother has a cannabis conviction, and we have a cannabis company coming here in New York called Mott's. So we're just in the same boat as you, but it seems like you might be a little further along, and you definitely have a lot worse of a criminal charge than my brother, it sounds like. So hopeful that everybody gets the licenses, and it's much smaller operators in New York, not the larger corporations coming in to try and take over like these huge MSOs that currently run New York.
There you go.
Yeah, I actually did the card license myself. It's my business.
Wow.
That I had for over 2 years, and then it's my convictions.
Wow, congrats, man. Well, if you need help with financing, give us a call. We're more than
I always need help with financing.
By the way, this is why I put the 2 of you together. All right. The fact that you've already cut to the chase is great. Joe, let's get back to the type of financing that is it all types? Is it convertible debt notes? Is it equity financing? Is it debt financing? What's the trend right now? And especially now with interest rates going up.
So we, on balance sheet, we lend unsecured. So we'll lend up to $10 billion unsecured based on the cash flow of a business. We do a lot with single state operators, multi-state operators once they're cash flowing. But our biggest line of business, which has outgrown our own balance sheet now, is the brokerage arm. So we like to call ourselves the #1 marketplace for cannabis operators. We have over 200 lending sources signed up, including 38 banks that will lend to cannabis. We really specialize in construction and equipment financing for newer markets and emerging markets. So we'll lend based on the as completed cannabis value of a facility, typically 65% loan to cost. And then the delta is usually equipment or equity. So, we need borrowers to have skin in the game in these newer markets. They need to come in with at least 30% equity. And the other portion of it, we're able to finance in debt through a construction loan with the lien on the property or equipment financing. So those have been our 2 biggest buckets, but we do everything. We do account receivable financing, purchase order financing, inventory financing, sale leaseback, senior debt deals, term loans, line of credits, everything.
Wow. You're a busy man. I know you are. And that's why I appreciate you making time on Fridays. How do you manufacture your products? Where is your facility? What's the process?
So right now I'm licensing the IP to a bigger operator in Massachusetts. You guys might be familiar with them, Revolutionary Clinics.
They're the sponsors of my show since the beginning.
We both know them well.
So they're out in Fitchburg, and they're doing the do for me out there. Yeah.
Great. They're great operators.
They really are. They've carved themselves a very nice portion of the market, and they come up with some great products. And there's There's a reason why Big Poppy got in bed with Rev Clinics, guys. Let's face it. The guy's a winner. He's the greatest clutch hitter in baseball history. Okay, I'm a little biased. I admit it. Okay, you guys know where I'm from, right?
Yeah, they're wholesaling to 85% of the market out in Massachusetts. So yeah.
Now I wonder if that market share is going to stay the same given the new grow facilities that are coming online right now. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And I'm sure they're all on top of that already. But Massachusetts is a fascinating market because it grew so fast and it's established now. And yet people are still trying to get into it and they're still looking to get their licenses. And I don't hear a lot of great success stories yet. Now, Rev Clinics is the exception. I get it. They're a medical dispensary with 3 and the number 1 wholesaler, right?
There's a lot of great success stories. Just, price compression happened in that market. They gave out too many licenses to too many operators. You have a lot coming online right now. There's a few tier 11 licenses coming on, which is a few 100,000 square feet of canopy, which will be turned on in the next few months. The price went from $4,000 a pound wholesale to a lot less. It's probably somewhere around 2-ish now, maybe even a little bit less depending on where you're growing. All right. So that price compression happens when these regulators just make it too easy for them to get licenses and they give out too many. Hopefully that doesn't happen in New Jersey and New York and Connecticut, the other markets that are coming on.
But none of us know how many is the right amount. This is because they're learning by doing.
Yeah, but you can calculate it, right? A dispensary consumes 1,000 pounds a month. A decent dispensary, some big dispensaries like Meta and the big boys, right? They're doing 10,000 pounds a month, right? So, you can just based on how many dispensaries there are, you should be able to calculate how many grow facilities and how many processors that you should put on, right? Got to learn from other states' mistakes. Look at California, right? You don't want to be.
They continue to make mistakes. Rick, you're in Michigan. There's another state that's had a few issues with overabundance, if you will. Is there a magic formula here, Rick?
Well, there's so many different pieces to the algorithm. It's difficult to predict. Do you have municipal control over whether or not cannabis businesses can entertain? Because in Michigan, we have 1,700 municipalities and only about 170 have said yes to cannabis businesses. So although we have market saturation, we don't have retail saturation across the state. So it's still very uneven. So when you're trying to predict how many licenses to allow, there's so many different deltas. But I'd love to ask about this. I had a private investment banker on my show, 420 Post, on Wednesday this week. And he said the only business that they would consider investing in right now is processing, because especially in Michigan, cultivation, retail, very subjective to these market forces where the falling price of cannabis is really destroying things. And the processing might be one of those insulated industries. Do you agree with that assessment?
In Michigan, yes, definitely. I mean, Michigan needs processors currently. A lot of cultivators on and dispensaries are coming, a lot of them. We know huge processors that are growing by double the amount in Michigan. We have the best program we have in Michigan is called PACE, where you can put a special purpose lien on the real estate tax assessment for any energy improvements. It's done by the Department of Energy, and they do it over a 20 to 30 year amortizations at like 7 to 9% with no payments for the first 2 years. And Michigan is the most friendly PACE state. So it's very easy for us to get these PACE deals approved in Michigan and help these operators to get built out quickly instead of phasing it out and doing it in pieces.
More, we'd be remiss if we did not mention a symphony, a Cynthia. Who is a symphony? Okay, who is your wife and your partner, and you both visited me today, which is a beautiful thing. I was so shocked that you took the drive out. It meant so much to me. Tell me the how do you balance work and life when you're working with your spouse, right?
Mhm. No, I think that's how it's always been with us. You know, it was honestly, it was hell. My wife worked in corporate America. When we met, I was working for the county. I was working for the water systems, and she was a teacher. So we were pretty much at the same way. But then she went to school and started doing other things, and I was hustling. We had a couple of businesses. I had a mobile detailing business and stuff. But my goal was for me and her to always be around each other as much as possible. We have 4 children. We homeschool, but I didn't like when she was in corporate America. So she left corporate America some years ago, and we've been working in the family real estate business. So we've always been working together. She does conventional real estate. It's her mother's brokerage, and I do some bird dogging and wholesaling and stuff. It's just another way for me to hustle. So yeah, we've always been, and we always gonna work together. So
Most people can't work with their wife.
Not for long. Not for long.
yeah,
I couldn't.
she's I guess, man, she's been like the poor man's personal assistant.
I hope she's not watching. I'm sure she didn't.
We work really well together. Actually, we were born the same year, 7 days apart. I was born
That's
June
great.
14th. She's born June 21st, 1980. We've been yin and yang in it type of thing.
Yin and yang. That's important in a relationship. I've learned
Yeah.
that. It's taken me a
Yeah.
few misses, let's just say, but I finally learned the yin and the yang. More, you mentioned corporate America and that Cynthia was part of that for a long time. Joe, in the space that you're in, will we see the development of corporate cannabis?
I mean, yeah, I think so.
Is it here? Is it the MSOs? Is it or is it the
I think it's the
evolutionary?
ancillary businesses, right? It's the cannabis PR companies, the cannabis lawyer firms, the cannabis accounting companies, and now you're having like places in New York, like Work and Roll, where you can go to a co-working place and smoke weed in Manhattan, and sit down and have a meeting, right? So eventually New York is going to be the largest tourism cannabis state out there, and we'll be smoking in restaurants, eating cannabis food. I mean, we're already smoking in restaurants here.
Yeah, I was in one.
Yeah.
The Medley, was it the Medley Supper Club?
Well,
It was, I couldn't believe it.
yeah, we go to this one called 99th Floor. It's ran by Chef Miguel Trinidad from Bon Appetit. They do like an 8-course tasting dinner. I think it was 10
Right.
courses last week. It's great, and it's a great way for somebody who doesn't smoke cannabis to get into consuming cannabis, because it's 25 milligram CBD, 25 milligram THC. It's given to you over a long period of time. So, I feel like my mother could even go to an event like that.
Well, let's not
She
go
doesn't
there.
smoke. She doesn't smoke though.
Okay, all right, I get you. So the one I was at, they had pre-rolls at everybody's place setting. I just thought that was the coolest thing. You show up, right? There's your fork, there's your knife, there's your pre-roll. I'm like, this is great.
This
And
one's no smoking, just in the food.
yeah, see, but that's why I mentioned this supper club, because I was absolutely blown away. Being a country bumpkin from Boston, driving down to New York, going to dinner, and having that experience, I was absolutely blown away. Rick, do we have anything like that going on in Michigan legally anyway?
Yeah, we do actually. We have all kinds of opportunities. There are social event licenses that are available. It's a new license type created by the state a couple of years ago, and that allows you to serve food, consume cannabis. Jamie Cooper was on the show earlier today. She's has her Sensi nights, which is exactly what that's about. And there are pre-rolls on the plates when you arrive at a Sensi night event, because that's what it's all about. So
Yeah.
even some of the hotels nowadays are coming online and being less aggressive towards penalizing people for smoking in rooms.
Vegas is all coming on. Social consumption lounge are coming. Atlantic City, they're coming. So it will be the norm in a couple of years.
Right.
And you're going to MJBizCon, Joe?
Yep, we have a booth at Cannabis. It's in Ballroom C. So stop by our booth. We'll have almost the entire team out there. So you'll see a lot of Upwise shirts, and I'm speaking on day 2 on the rise of cannabis debt financing. And we have a million parties to go to. Sensi, obviously one of them.
How do you differentiate one opportunity from another? What's the thing that you look for? Is it the team? Is it the amount of revenue? Is it the scalability? What is there, or is it all of the above and it's a combination thereof?
Yeah, it's a combination of all the above. You know, we look for somebody on the team to have cannabis experience. We're looking for liquidity. We're looking for skin in the game, and we're looking for good borrowers that can execute a business plan. You know, if they hit all those check boxes, there's typically some type of product within all the product suites that we offer that we can get them approved for.
Maurice, so that you're on your own from here on in, Maurice. Okay, because
Yeah.
No,
I
can only lead you to the, what's that?
I've already got it. You know, what I practice the law of attraction and mentalism. So it's already mine. I already, once he said he had it to give, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. We'll grab that.
We're looking to do more and more deals, especially here in New York, right? If we can be involved in building out all these New York operators, it's a dream for me. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely the person you want to deal with in that type of respect.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think, look, I think the New York market, you could concentrate on that state's market now, probably for the next 10 years and not have to worry about interstate commerce or anything. You're going to have your work cut out for you in that state just because of the vast amount of people that are there. And it's already, you go to Manhattan, it's the Wild West out there. I mean, you could smell it while you walk down any street in New York now. And it's almost like it's like a freedom. When I get a whiff of cannabis and I'm walking in the streets, for an old guy like me, it is so amazing to have that happen. Rick, you can understand it. I mean,
I am not an old guy like you, Jimmy, though. Appreciate that. Nice.
You're not as old as I am. All right.
What I don't like is all the smoke shops are now selling California weed, right? So the OCM really has to crack down on these guys in order for dispensary owners and card licenses to actually thrive. These guys aren't getting taxed cannabis taxes. They're not paying 10.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. And that's what happened to me in Massachusetts in 2015. I was operating in the gray market before the industry had fully opened up. And I caught a secret indictment. A cop infiltrated my community. I had about 100 people in my community. And that's why I'm very scared for what's going on with people in New York. I was charged for sale to an undercover cop, Schedule I drug. And I ended up beating it, ended up getting it thrown out in pretrial. But yeah, taxes, what are you doing with your tax money and everything? It's a very scary thing.
No state regulatory program has enough human beings in it in order to successfully police their program. What you're talking about happens here in Michigan as well. So I know that it's a goal that we have, that we would like to make sure no out-of-state cannabis penetrates the marketplace, but it is an unachievable goal.
Yeah, it'll happen no matter what, but they just need to actually do what they say and crack down on the smoke shops and actually start finding them or whatever the case may be, because right now, like Jimmy said, it's a wild, wild west.
And it was the Wild Wild West in Massachusetts after the voters voted it in, before they started to open up dispensaries as well. You had your caregivers, you had your big gifts, right? Buy this lollipop for $5 and we'll gift you, another. Oh wait, the lollipop isn't $5. The lollipop is $50. That's right. And we'll give you a bonus of an eighth of weed, right?
Yeah.
So, the human being, we're always looking for the shortcut, aren't we? Isn't that natural for us to make it as easy as possible on our thinking, on our processes? Is that a fault, or that's just how we are, right?
We still operate under the rules, though. We still have guidelines, even if it's an internal chivalry that we have that decides what our code of conduct is that we're going to have going forward, how we treat women, how we treat other people. So we can all still be looking for a shortcut, but still there's morality that's involved too. And I think that's really lacking in the industry on some people's part.
Has it evolved? Well, I think it's actually eroded in our entire world, Rick, to be honest with you. but let's not, we got enough issues in cannabis, right? Let's just stick with that right now. Hey, Maura, how can people get your product? Tell me where they can get it, where they can get you. Give yourself a plug. How do people find you?
So we are in almost 60 stores across Massachusetts. We're talking to some product. We're actually in New York right now. We're talking to some product manufacturers in New York to get it in New York. But right now we're just in Massachusetts, 60 plus, almost 60 stores in Massachusetts, and growing. And you know, New York, New Jersey. We're looking to get in those places also.
So you're traveling salespeople right now. I mean, you're going almost door to door, meeting with the different licensees. I mean, how?
Man, when in Legacy, I used to go to California, guys. I used to go to Colorado, bring it to Massachusetts, bring it to Georgia, bring it to North Carolina, bring it to New York.
I am
Yeah.
shocked. I am shocked to hear. I am shocked to hear that there's interstate commerce going on in cannabis, and there has been for decades. Shocked to hear that.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, how do people find Upwise Capital?
Go to upwisecapital.com. You can email us at 420-420 at upwisecapital.com. That goes to me and my cannabis team. Come see us in Vegas at Cannabis. Come day 2, I'll be speaking at 8:30 in the morning. Like, everybody will hopefully be up and at my event to see us speak. And you know, we're at every event, so find us where we are.
There you go. All right. Well, for everybody who's been involved with this show, it's really been, Rick Thompson. I mean, quickest 2 hours I've had in a long time. I don't know about you.
It's a lot of fun. That's why I love doing the Green Show. It's just so much. It's a blast. It goes quick.
We have great guests. We turn them over fast. And I want to thank Joe for finally getting it into his calendar and making it. It was great to see you. Best to everybody on your team. Mar, I'll never forget the first couple to come visit me in Clinton is you and Cynthia. That makes it into the book. You're in my book of life. You'll be here forever. Thank you very much.
We have to turn that into a nice little retreat over there or something, man.
It is nice. I don't know if Dan was able to punch up that photo or not, but there's a great view outside my bedroom window and my side deck here. And during the fall and foliage, it's been magnificent here now in the little town of Clinton in Massachusetts. So for Rick Thompson, our staff, Isabel Turner and Dan French, for Joe and Mar and Chris and all the other guests that we've had on the show, Michael Correa and JJ McKay from the Fresh Toast, all of you, Jackie Bryant, and also Jamie Cooper. I got you all in there. I'm Jimmy Young. Thanks for watching. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. We'll see you next week.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, is the lame duck Congress going to deliver federal cannabis reform? Senator Chuck Schumer infers just that. Meanwhile, New York State lowers its threshold for imperfections on state-grown weed, hoping they'll have enough product when their adult program launches. Plus, Vermont adult use dispensaries are now open for business. And Switzerland becomes the latest European Union country to start a medical cannabis program. All that and coast-to-coast cannabis reports on We Talk News with Elena Pinto. Next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media, and welcome to We Talk News. We're just a few days away from the midterm election, and cannabis policy is taking center stage in several states, as well as Capitol Hill. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has Congress, quote, getting close to introducing and passing some form of the Safe Banking Act. Marijuana Moment reports it's intended for a package of modest reforms to be filed during the lame duck session and pass it through both chambers and send it to the president's desk before the end of the current Congress. We spoke with attorney Blake Mensing, who's done lots of legal work in the industry, and he says while the timeline might not be totally clear, the much needed reform is closer than we think.
So we absolutely will see reform at the federal level. I don't have the crystal ball in terms of what will happen when. The Safe Banking Act would do a lot for the industry. A lot of advocates have said that let's not take this baby incremental step. Let's try to make things structurally sound now, because we know there's going to be a shift in regulation across the country when the feds get involved. The biggest bone of contention on folks who say safe banking doesn't go far enough is that it's completely silent on equity. And equity in this context is not, about dollars and cents. It's about people who were wronged by the failed drug war, who need to, I think, get a first crack at state licensure as well as federal licensure. And the Safe Banking Act really just would open up some more, financial avenues, which are clearly needed, but it's not, the great cure-all. It's not a silver bullet. It will not change things overnight.
Only time will tell just when that reform will become reality. And for a closer look at Congress's efforts and everything else happening in the nation's capital this week, let's check in with Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the We Talk News DC Report. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says that Congress is close to passing a bipartisan cannabis reform bill this session. During a debate this week with Senate challenger Joe Pinion, Schumer said he's been working with members of both parties on a combined banking and expungements bill, and that it may get done, quote, rather soon. The so-called Safe Plus bill combines provisions of the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act with measures to expunge the records of those with nonviolent cannabis convictions. The Safe Banking Act has been passed out of the House in one form or another 7 times in recent years. The bill aims to protect institutions that offer financial services to legitimate cannabis businesses from federal penalties. The Safe Plus bill is not expected to federally legalize marijuana. President Biden this week equated the cannabis pardons he issued last month to expungements. During an interview on the Ricky Smiley Morning Show, Biden touted the pardons for people convicted of simple cannabis possession as something he's done to improve the lives of Black Americans. Biden went on to say that, quote, anybody who is ever arrested just for the possession of marijuana, their record is expunged. According to a 2016 Congressional Research Service report, however, the president appears to have overstated the facts. The CRS report states that while a pardon does restore certain rights, it does not go as far as an expungement, which, quote, removes the record of the conviction as well as the underlying guilt. The presidential pardons affected some 7,500 U.S. citizens and legal aliens convicted of one or more cannabis offenses. A demographic breakdown shows that 41.3% of them are white, 31.8% are Hispanic, and 23.6% are Black. With Maryland citizens set to vote next week on an adult use referendum, a new ad campaign dropped this week to promote its passage. The Yes on 4 campaign released a 15-second spot urging voters to approve the ballot initiative passed by the Maryland General Assembly last April. Question 4 simply asks voters if they favor legalization of cannabis by individuals at least 21 years of age in the state of Maryland. A recent Washington Post University of Maryland poll shows 73% of Marylanders favor legalization. If the measure is approved as expected, a complementary bill setting the regulations for the adult use program would take effect. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
As more states legalize the plant and look to clarify regulations, many still don't allow adults to grow their own cannabis at home, including in the Garden State. But this week, New Jersey's governor said the state should, quote, revisit its current criminalization of homegrown cannabis once the current market has had time to mature. Jill Goldsberry is in New Jersey with all the details.
Hey, New Jersey cannabis lovers. This is Jill Goldsberry here with the New Jersey Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Well, it looks like there is going to be some new considerations in New Jersey on homegrown cultivation. According to a recent report in Marijuana Moments, Governor Phil Murphy agrees that New Jersey doesn't have enough recreational cannabis locations currently in operation. And for this reason, the governor has stressed that he does not want the industry dominated by the big guys, meaning the MSOs, the multi-state operators. And this week on Ask the Governor podcast, which is on WNYC radio, he was asked about the plant distinction between growing at home and getting the plant at a local dispensary. When does it become legal as a plant? Was the question. His answer in short is giving cannabis lovers some sort of hope, since the industry is doing well, already ranking in over $4.6 million in tax revenue this year. Governor Murphy answered the question quite modestly, and he said, and I quote, "I'm of the opinion that we should revisit the question at some point, and I'm not sure now is the right time to revisit it." So we will keep watch for more news on this and update the homegrown conversation. So hopefully this time next year, there will be some changes in the allowances for the homegrown plant. I'm Jill Goldsberry with Weed Talk News. This has been your news in New Jersey, and it's been great talking to you.
Another East Coast state facing some changes is Massachusetts. Earlier this summer, Governor Charlie Baker signed off on a package of reforms for the state's industry, but with changes set to take place next week, now there are many questions about the implementation and application of the state's new laws. We Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain breaks it down in this week's Bay State Report.
Hey guys, I'm Tori Chamberlain, and here's what's happening in Massachusetts. Earlier this summer, lawmakers put together a package of reforms having to do with cannabis business all across the state, and it was ultimately signed into law and passed off by Governor Charlie Baker. Now, those laws are set to take effect next week as we head into the midterm elections. And while a lot of them are really exciting, having to do with social equity and even cannabis consumption lounges, there seems to be a bit of confusion surrounding one of the new laws, according to Dan Adams of the Boston Globe, and it has to do with host community agreements. In Massachusetts, a cannabis company must first negotiate with local leaders in the municipality where it wants to operate before they go ahead and apply for that state license. Now, lawmakers were basically facing pressure from municipal leaders to pretty much preserve existing deals that are already being upheld. But cannabis companies and operators were pressuring them to reform those deals and how the process was done. With this new law, the legislature basically chose to do neither and instead leaves the decision in the hands of the Cannabis Control Commission. Now, that agency has a lot on its hands right now, so only time will tell when they're going to get around to addressing this issue. But for the time being, the Boston Globe is reporting that several communities have actually stopped approving new cannabis facilities until regulators step in and provide guidance surrounding this law. In lighter news, though, Massachusetts and Cape Cod in particular is known for its cranberry bogs, but move over cranberries because there is a new top crop in town. Leafly just issued its 2022 harvest report, and citing some information from the 2021 State Agricultural Review, it finds that cannabis now brings in more crop value to the Bay State than cranberries by a long shot. Cranberries bring in $66 million on average to the state at wholesale value, while cannabis now brings in $362 million. So that's, I can't even do the math, so much more than the cranberries are bringing in. So just goes to show you, like we always tell you, that it's a whole new world of weed. We'll continue to watch the industry grow here in the Bay State. For now, I'm Tori Chamberlain for Weed Talk News.
Traveling to Vermont now, where the Green Mountain State is only getting greener. Recreational sales have been underway for just about a month now, and state regulators don't seem to have any plans of slowing down the budding industry. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with more from Vermont this week.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Vermonters were welcomed in the door of two new retailers who opened shop this past week. Higher Elevation in Morrisville and Magic Man in Essex Junction are open for business. This week, the Vermont Cannabis Control Board awarded 9 more cannabis licenses, including 1 retailer, making a total of 16 retailers approved so far. With 1 month since the start of adult use sales, the Control Board gave a progress report noting significant milestones as they have issued nearly 300 licenses for cannabis establishments and 300 employee ID cards. After acknowledging the bottlenecks from product manufacturing and lab testing, with only 3 labs currently operating and 1 newly licensed, Commissioner Pepper acknowledged the backlog for product registry, but warned retailers that selling unregistered products was an actionable offense for the board with possibility of suspension or license revocation. Pepper urged licensees to follow rules for the sake of the market's legislative viability and sustainability. His final warning was to those who remain in the illicit market and use social media vagrantly, that upon complaints, compliance staff will refer them for criminal investigation. The board continues to give weekly updates on the medical program, reporting numerical data on how many new caregiver and patient applications, renewals, and approvals, as well as new dispensary employees are recorded. Hetty Vermont hosts their 5th annual Veterans Day giveaway from 12 to 2 p.m. on Saturday, November 12th. Visit hettyvermont.com for more information. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse and ganjier, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Overseas, Europe is getting a little greener as well. Switzerland gave the green light for medical cannabis earlier this summer, and now the first medical marijuana imports are arriving in the country. So let's check in with Lex Pelger for the very latest happening across the pond.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lex Pelger of White Whale Creations for Weed Talk News. This is your European Cannabis Report. The biggest news comes out of Switzerland because they're having their first medical cannabis imports. 2 companies are joining up, Solumedics and Astrisana, and they're initiating the first imports of medical cannabis. These 2 companies will control all the steps from cultivation of the plants to patient care. This is important because they only opened up medical cannabis to simply a doctor's prescription in August. And so this is the beginning of true medical cannabis in Switzerland. So it's a really big deal for patients there. The next story is similar. In Czech, policymakers have presented a draft plan at the cabinet level for regulation of cannabis. They're lamenting that they're losing billions of crowns each year in taxation, and they want to come up with a strictly regulated cannabis market for the Czech Republic. This is important because Czech has always been somewhat of regressive and not into the cannabis thing. So to see this opening up at the level of cabinet is a big deal. And lastly, in hemp news, the USDA of the United States released a report on the hemp market in the EU, and it's grown 75% since 2015. This is important for the sequestration of carbon dioxide, as well as for the many uses of hemp fiber and hemp seed. The biggest grower by far is France, where I am, with 37%, followed by Italy and Netherlands with 8% each, and then spread out across the other little countries. That's the news in Europe. I'm Lex Pelger of White Whale Creations, and this is Weed Talk News.
America's neighbor to the north has had federally legal cannabis for 4 years now, but the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Similarly to many American companies, cannabis workers and business owners in Canada say they've suffered some negative effects from legalization. And now there's a group getting together to officially represent the interests of licensed Canadian cannabis stores at the federal level. Our Canadian correspondent, Debbie Facey, has the story.
Hi, this is Debbie Facey from We Talk News, coming at you with the Canadian Joint of the Week. This week, what we have coming to the market, I should say spring 2023, Tilray has been able to make an agreement with the Colorado-based dispensary LP, where we're going to be able to obtain the wonderful strain Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web has been known for the great relief that it's done for a lot of the autistic children, as well as many of the adults that are suffering from autism and any other sort of ailment that cannabis, or I should say CBD, has been made a positive influence on. So we're going to be able to obtain the Charlotte's Web strain, but it's going to be distributed to medical patients first, and then it's going to be regulated to recreational users, which I do believe is a great way in order for us to start creating a little bit more of a difference when it comes to the medical needs versus the recreational needs, due to the abundance that we do have here in Canada, or I should say almost in Ontario. But no, it's a great thing that we're going to be able to do. And I think a lot of people are going to be not only happy, but be very beneficial from it. Also, what we have going on is the great, I want to say, reformatting of the need of additional THC added to the beverages that we already have on the market. Currently, some of the beverages do have the 10 milligram mark, but it is capped at the amount of beverages you're able to purchase. What they are now arguing, or I should say suggesting, is for them to up the amount of THC that is not only going to be in the product, but the amount of product the customer is able to purchase. So, as for example, that is going from 5 cans per customer to a wonderful whopping 48 cans. I'm not too sure where the 48 or how we really got the jump from 5 to 48, but somehow that is a logical number. And I guess we shall see if Canada does overall agree with such consumption levels. But at the same time, I personally do think that we are kind of jumping the gun when it does come to the amount of THC being added into our beverages, much less edibles. But that's just my opinion. Can't speak for all of Canada. The last but not least, we did just have Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone. Here in Ontario, we've had the, I want to say, the beneficial, but also the downside of a lot of the illicit market still being intact. And what I mean by being intact, as in there are still stores that are operating regardless of raids or being shut down within the future, past, or currently, there are still the elite market which are operating. And over the Halloween weekend, there were 2 that decided to have Halloween events. And George Smitherman had found out, which is one of the most important people when it comes to our cannabis laws and agreements. He actually ended up attending the events and was not only appalled, but almost confused about how we had a elect market, a special store, not only dispensing cannabis, but also dispensing popcorn to all of the children that were also trick-or-treating. Here in Canada, we do have that big, I want to say, challenge when it does come to the legacy and the legal market. But here in Ontario, we tend to have a little bit more of an issue because of the amount of illicit markets in the stores that had created before and are still intact and have found ways to be able to get around the laws. So that being said, Halloween was great. Aside the 2 stores that decided to distribute popcorn to the children, which I do have to say they shouldn't have done. But once again, this is Debbie Facey from We Talk News with your Canadian Joint of the Week.
Also in California, cannabis cultivators have long suffered from an onslaught of tough taxation and strict regulations. In a recent film screening in Oakland, Governor Gavin Newsom was featured in a video where he expressed his interest in seeing reform happen at the federal level so that farmers in California can, quote, supply the rest of the nation when it comes to cannabis. And speaking of supporting cultivators, regulators in Washington state are considering some changes to cut them some slack as well. And they want to cut out the middleman altogether and allow farmers to sell their product directly to consumers. Josh Kincaid has the details in this week's Washington State Report.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for We Talk News. Washington considers allowing cannabis growers to have direct-to-consumer sales. Washington's considering allowing small cannabis farmers to sell directly to consumers, similar to what's allowed for wineries, breweries, and distilleries. Washington would also be following the lead of a few Canadian provinces that allow licensed producers to sell cannabis to consumers at cultivation facilities. And as a reminder, Washington is not vertically integrated, meaning that growers and manufacturers cannot also be retailers. Given the imbalance between cannabis producer licenses and cannabis retail licenses in Washington, prices have plummeted and small farmers are struggling to find a way to get their products in front of customers. So ongoing discussions on how to solve the problem have coalesced into a new possibility of allowing direct sales at cultivation sites. Cannabis farmers markets were common during Washington state's medical-only days before adult use regulations and other changes pushed patients and customers into state licensed stores. The move, if approved by regulators, would give small growers a financial boost through increased sales and could spur other states to follow suit. So when will Washington state get direct-to-consumer sales? You're gonna have to come back to the Weed Talk News to find out. But with that, we're gonna have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Heads reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.
Sticking with the Pacific Northwest, cultivation issues seem to be a theme out there. The wholesale price of cannabis has been dropping dramatically in a number of markets, making it tough for cultivators to remain competitive. And that's exactly what's happening in Oregon. Marianne Kersagi is in Oregon to explain.
I'm Marianne from Alibi Cannabis with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The drop in wholesale prices continues to put untenable pressures on producers. According to OLCC data, wholesale prices are down 60% from September of 2020, which was the last peak. Retail prices are down only 36% over the same time period. So this is another example of pricing pressures being pushed up the supply chain. On better news, P3 Packaging has launched a recycling program for metric plant tags and ties. Simply stop by their facility in Milwaukee and grab a free box or drop off your tags for recycling. And finally, there are a number of rule changes the OLCC is working through. The most alarming is an attempt to curb inaccurate test results by forcing producers to recall and retag product if it is found to have inaccurate test results. There are no proposed consequences for the labs actually generating these inaccurate results. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
And finally, we tell you every week, it is a whole new world of weed out there, and even the OGs of the cannabis industry are brewing up new ideas every day. PAX, a pioneering leader in the vaping department, has released its new vaporizer devices that some are calling the Nespresso of cannabis. The new PAX infused flower with solventless hash features a compressed puck of cannabis infused with solventless hash. So that fits right into your vape for an easy and apparently pretty tasty high. So next time you're looking for a little pick-me-up, you can grab a pre-packaged puck. That's just as convenient as picking up a fresh espresso. It really is a whole new world of weed out there. So remember, use it wisely. That's all for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media. We'll see you next time.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand